Lieutenant Commander Jadzia Dax thinks Cardassians like their politics complex. Major Kira is the closest thing to family Tekeni Gamor has left. And Star Trek Deep Space Nine, you killed Tekeni. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc.
Wow. I think our first South Park reference there. Sorry, Matt and Trey.
There's somebody out there that just said, "You bastard," but it wasn't you.
No, I didn't. I didn't jump on that. I'm good. How you doing?
Awesome. Thanks. Everybody at home, today we are doing a review of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 5, Episode 19, Ties of Blood and Water. The story is by Edmund Newton and Robin L. Slocum. Teleplay is our good friend, Mr. Robert Hewitt Wolf, and directed by Avery Brooks. This is going to be a fun one.
That's a lot of good information there.
Also, very quickly, we'd like to give a shout out to our good friend, Dr. Susan V. Gruner. She's got a lot of things going on in her life. It's just such a maelstrom of things for everybody, but especially her right now. So we want to give a shout out to Dr. Sue. We love you, and we can't wait to see you back in the free-for-alls.
Absolutely. We do love you, and we are always wishing well for you, and our prayers and thoughts are with you.
100%. One final thing, obviously, what am I thinking? I'm wearing an awesome shirt made by Cirroc's sister, Cirroc's sister Merone. The website is called Abyssinian Kiosk. You can find that in the description box below. You can find the link there. All kinds of really cool designs, Ethiopian, East African, and African in general. Some of them are Star Trek related. Some of them just look awesome. So check those out, Abyssinian Kiosk.
Yeah, thank you guys for all your support and love over the time that we've been doing it together. So definitely good stuff. But yeah, let's get into this episode.
Right. It's everybody. It's
blood and water.
It's your favorite time of the week, guys. It's time to party. We're going to talk about Star Trek. Ties of Blood and Water. Yeah, what do you think?
Well, my initial thought was kind of like a quarter to halfway through the episode. I was a little bit saying this episode is slow for me. I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was. I think it was just kind of the unfolding of the story. A lot of the times we see them trying to cram so much story into these dialogues, into these scenes with these characters. And in this one, I kind of anticipated half of the story once they, started rolling into it. So I didn't need that kind of drawn out exposure of what the past was and what it was about. So it was a little slow for me at the start.
Yeah. Do you remember Legate Gamor? That was the episode in which Kira woke up as a Cardassian, and she met her father that was supposedly, bringing her back or whatever from being a spy. She was a Cardassian spy pretending to be a Bajoran. And for a moment there, she started to believe it, and she thinks he's really cool, and turns out he's a really nice guy. And the real person was Ileana, the real Cardassian lady. That was when, who was it? Sisko walks in with the duffel bag, and he throws the duffel bag behind the Cardassians, and it turns into Odo, and he beats him up or whatever.
Yes.
But anyway, so this guy is back to Tekeni Gamor. And, I kind of feel the same way, where he comes back, and at first you say, oh, that's really cool. That's really interesting. We get to follow along in that story. But then you're kind of like, okay, so let's move it forward. Where's this going, And spoiler, the end was, I was just like, okay, this is where it's going. And where it's going is a beautifully written ending and beautifully performed ending by Nana. I actually kind of went back and watched the way she performed and formed in lines. Sorry, I think I have a microphone issue there. How's that?
Little echo. Yeah, we're okay.
Great. But yeah, maybe I should go back and redo how I performed that last line there. But
sound. No, I think that's why I said the first half. I didn't.
Yeah.
I kind of view this episode as a tale of two halves. And the first half of it was a little bit slow for me, and I was like, okay, get on with it. I get it. I felt like I've seen this story somewhere before about somebody coming to die or somebody dying, or we know they're about to die. I can't put my finger on exactly which episode it's been, but I feel like I've seen somebody on their deathbed several times in this show. So
yes.
So in that regard, I wasn't exactly like, oh, wow, I'm blown away. This is kind of something that's been repeated. So they needed to get me on the hook a lot faster and with a kind of a different twist, or introduce it with a, quicker and get to it. So that's why I felt like the first half of it was slow. Now, once the second half of it, I would rate differently. I would look at it and say, okay, well, they got a lot of scenes with her and her father. You mentioned the final scene with Nana as Kira. I thought she knocked that out the park. I also like the interaction with Ducat and Sisko at various points during the second half. And of course, I'm always a big fan of Jeffrey Combs. So the episode began for me when Jeffrey Combs showed up.
Well, that's the basic rule for every episode. Like we could just say there should be like a Jeffrey Combs factor of like how an episode goes bink. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like when Jeffrey Combs shows up and everybody else is like, well, what about the rest of us? Well, it's Jeff Combs, whatever.
I mean, yeah, it was okay up until then, but then when Jeff shows up, then you're like, oh, this is about to get interesting. This is going to be, a performance to watch, and this is going to be, charming. He brings this level of charm and wit to his character that elevates the tone and elevates the conversation, elevates the quality of the production. And, hats off to Jeffrey Combs. We'd love to have him on the show and talk about his performances and his characters. But he is exceptional and remarkable at playing these characters that he plays. Wei Yun in particular is my favorite because it's just he's so in control and so elegant about how he's in control. It's a refined kind of manipulation that's different than the brute force that we see with Ducat or some of the other characters who are also conniving. He is more refined at it and kind of graceful about it.
And since we're moving into Wei Yun, to me that was almost like the subplot. It was almost like the B story, even though it was one main story, but it felt like, because there was something that happened. I didn't remember when it was or where it was in Deep Space Nine, but there is a moment, and it happens in this episode, where we are explained why Wei Yun keeps coming back. Because as we all know, his first appearance, he dies. And the writers have gone on record saying, what the hell have we done? We killed a character that was played so interestingly by this Jeff Combs fella. And so they decided, here's a way to bring him back. And to me, that moment really created the Vorta, because we already kind of had an idea what they were and where they were going. And Jeff Combs, obviously, we know, took it to a different level. And then now they've created more of a story about cloning and about Wei Yun the fourth being killed. And this is Wei Yun the fifth. And there's just so much more depth to these aliens now that we've learned so much more. And I wondered, it seemed as though Jeff played Wei Yun number 5 differently than he played Wei Yun number 4 a little bit. Like this one was more jovial. This one was more excited to play games. He says, I love games, and he just, And I do wonder, and yeah, if we can get him on the show, we should ask him, did he deliberately try to change how he portrayed each Weyoun slightly differently? Same genetic makeup, but the experiences might have made a different type of person. I don't know. Did you catch any of that?
I did catch a slight subtle difference in the way he played the character. And I thought that the line that explained the cloning was such a throwaway. It was like, it felt like a big, like, wow, this is big information here. And he threw it away very casually. Oh no. And which was great, which is great, because they explained away why we just saw a guy who's dead. It's kind of like, it's the opposite of what we saw with Shax in Lower Decks, right? It's like
yes, it is the very opposite. Yeah, right. Where they beat it to death.
They beat that thing to death, and they made the whole thing about it. In this situation, he was like, that was just, oh, you didn't know?
Yeah, where have you been?
Yeah, like I thought you knew. That's how we conduct business. It's better for business. And it was such a light throwaway to why we get to see this character reemerge. But he also played it like you said, there was a certain levity to it. There was a little bit more of a humor to it. I felt like the charm factor was even increased to a higher level. He seemed very likable. Like if I was Sisko, in Sisko's shoes in those moments, I would kind of warm up to him and say, hey, since you're in charge, let me deal with you, since
that's a good point.
Your buddy over here who's trying to tell me he deserves all these titles and he's the emperor, Sultan, whatever he was.
Sultan.
I forgot the list, but then he even said emissary at one time. Really to rub it in on Sisko.
Okay, well, since we're going there, I just happened to write that part down. When he says. Yes. Ducat says he prefers Gull. It's more hands-on than a legate, and it's less pretentious than the other alternatives. President, emperor, first minister, emissary, and I'm thinking, ooh, that's a burn right there. But Sisko goes,
that's a burn.
How about Dominion puppet? And I'm like, ooh, ouch. Yikes. I don't know if he's going to heal from that.
Burst that bubble. Yeah, he said, don't get the big head over here. I'm going to remind you that I don't bow down to you the way you think everyone should. But then when he says Dominion puppet, then you see Weyoun come in and you think, well, he's a puppet for this guy or for these guys, right? Because they're in control at this point. The hierarchy, he answers to them, they answer to the founders, and and the way this thing is working. So I love Combs' performance. I did feel a slight change, but they kind of explained it the way you see, like in the movie The Terminator, where the new T-1000 would come out, and then this was the new Terminator, and this is the new version, except that they all look the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a brilliant play with the limits of science fiction, which are boundless. You can play with those kinds of concepts, and you can also throw it away so casually as well, where it's it's like, come on, that's old news.
Yeah.
So yes, I believe the episode started for me. That's when I perked up when I saw Jeffrey Combs. I said, okay, all right, let me back on. Because I was doodling, and the first half I was like, come on, like I get it, the guy's dying, and this, and they kind of had the interplay with Bajorans and Cardassians played out before, like this kind of enemies but friends type of deal. Mm-hmm. They played that subject line when they played Ducat's daughter. And they, her being half Bajoran and the kind of relationship that he had with this woman. And so they touched upon how closely they've interacted before culturally. And it wasn't such a surprise because they've already delved into these kinds of subject matter. So when I see that playing out again, it's not like, oh, wow, Bajorans and the Cardassians were working together, and then there was this resistance movement, and there was this people working together and trying to have same common goals. That kind of seems like what was played out with Dukat and his daughter, and other episodes. I think the one you just mentioned earlier, where Kira was playing undercover and all of that stuff. So,
by the way, speaking of that, just real quick, and I know we're kind of bouncing around a bit, but did you notice another character that from previous episodes that came back? That was the character Frizzell. He was in the flashbacks when Kira was remembering, and the big guy pulls in her father, and he's like, Kira, your dad or whatever. That was the guy that was missing an arm later on in her resistance cell when she went and met Shakar, I think it was the first time, or whoever it was. And then the armless guy and a lady show up later in a more recent episode where Kira goes on her revenge path after they get killed. So it was nice to see this guy getting more work, even though he's been killed, but they can go on the past. And I remember thinking that I bet if that actor were not available, they could have just chosen the actress that was, it could have been any of the 2 or 3 people that were in her previous cell. Because I remember thinking that's really cool that they have these little bits to where they say, hey, we can bring back a character that we've used and we like, and I'm always looking for those kind of things for the actors. Because, the actors are super happy when their character's dead. And 3 months later, they get a call. They're like, can you come back? And they're like, I don't know how, but sure, I'd love to. What a deal. I thought my days were over, but Frizzell is back and now he's happy. Okay. Never mind.
Okay. Yeah.
Come on.
We'll just let that slide.
Clap along. No?
But I'll say that it is a great attention to detail. I want to credit the writers for making sure that they, kept the continuity in that department. I thought that's, it's great for the actor to work, but it's also great that the writers kept the continuity and make sure that, you see people that you're familiar with. And
it's good for the fans. Yeah.
It's good for the fans. It just makes it so that it's not just a production that's just going and rolling along and they don't care, bring in the next actor. It's also about, we're building stories, we're building these community of characters, and we're going to keep them involved in different ways. So I think that's just a credit also to the writers who are thoughtful enough to do that.
So I was happy about that. I was happy to see Weyoun back, and I'm always happy to see Dukat. I was happy to see Tekeni Gamor back, because that's just an expansion of a character. That's growth in a character that we maybe thought was never going to be back. And it was great to see Frizzell back, although his is spelled, I think, Furel, something like that. I don't know if we've ever seen Kira's father before. I think that was the first time. And then there was another guy that was tending to her father. I feel like those were first timers, at least to my memory. And when you were talking about, the Cardassians and Bajorans, and we've definitely explored that to death. And when you're talking about these other examples, the one that's popping in my head is when Kira was pulling the spike out of Dukat's butt. Remember? And they kind of had like a little rom-com moment,
Oh yeah, that was.
I'll never forget that one. Forever ingrained in my head. But I will say that when I first watched Star Trek Deep Space Nine back in the day, what I remember my feelings being way back in the day was, okay, I don't really care too much about the Bajoran lore and the Bajoran culture any more than I do any of the other aliens. And I remember thinking that Deep Space Nine explored the Bajoran stuff a lot. And it wasn't necessarily what I looked forward to. I looked forward to like the battles and the Dominion and all these kind of things. But now upon the rewatch, I really appreciate it much more. And I don't know if it's because I knew what to expect, or if it's just because, now I'm a different person than I was when I watched it, whatever it was 20 years ago. But now I really see the correlations. I mean, we get it. We understand what inspired these storylines and these angles, 25 years ago, and how they could have been written 200 years ago for things that happened hundreds of years ago. And they could be written today, because of the corollaries that there are still today. And I think a lot of that is what makes it stand the test of time for me. And I actually appreciate it more, but also because, for me personally, now I know a lot of these actors as friends, or at least as acquaintances. And it really blows me away how good they are. Really, before it would kind of, when I first watched it, it would begin and end with Gul Dukat and Wei Yun and Sisko as well, and then later on Nog really kind of stood out to me, and Dax, but then now as time goes on, I'm just like, dude, every one of them. Nana blows me away. Renee playing Odo blows me away. Everybody loves Max and Armin, you know what I mean? So maybe that's what it is. But anyway, it was just interesting to hear your thoughts on, another Bajorn thing, because I'm like, I've been there.
Yeah, and and I don't have any bias against the Bajorn story. It's just that I felt like this is a kind of a recycle of several different episodes.
Interesting.
Mixed in together. Even with Duet, we saw a lot of these kinds of topics coming out, right? And there was a lot of this back and forth between this is my point of view and this is your point of view. And in this case, unless I think the stakes should have been higher for me, I felt like if this Tekeni Lofton guy had
nice. Very good. Very good.
No, if this Tekeni guy, if he had some kind of secret knowledge about something that Dukat does not want anybody to know about, that will weaken his, image or whatever. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's like something Dukat did that was actually good, right? Or, he did this, he saved these people, or he did this, whatever good act, or, he gave this person burial rights, or I don't know, whatever, something good that he did that he would be ashamed about being exposed.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would see the stakes a little bit higher. It just felt like the secrets he was giving up were just like, okay, I didn't see like any real, anything really there, because he's part of the resistance, so everybody else in the resistance knows some piece of this story too. It's not like he was a one-man mercenary out there and he's like, let me tell you what I found out while I was doing my Rambo thing. He was working with people, and there were people fighting alongside him, and so and she even refers to him going back to join the Cardassian resistance at some point and being the leader, right? She was initially, when he showed up, she's like, I'm going to plug you with these people, then, you'll fit in perfectly. You can be their leader, because they're continuing to fight, and he's like, I'm dying. And then, that shut that option down really quickly.
And we definitely, I feel like we kind of saw that coming, right? Because you've got to raise the stakes. You got to make something pop up right away. And we do have to jump onto our break in just a second here, but everybody stick around, because Cirroc's got a lot more to say on this, I could tell. And I've got a lot, and I got to catch up with his Tekeni Lofton joke, like when he played music and he was Tekeni G, or what's his name? Tekeni Gamor, right? So his brother's name is Sodom, and if you eat him as a crispy snack, he's Gamor's. But anyway.
Wow, you got it, man. This guy's quick.
When you did the Tekeni Lofton, I was like, damn it, why didn't I think of that? That's too good. Anyway, so we'll be right back. We're going to talk about a lot of great stuff on the Seventh Rule.